So I just saw the new X-Men movie, Dark Phoenix, and it was bad. I went into this movie kind of expecting a colossal disaster, and this movie did not surprise me in quality. I should probably know that the laughable promotional material was not the only reason I was expecting a giant mess. For one, this movie went through production hell. This film was originally meant to release last November, but then was delayed for reshoots till what should have been last February. However, it was delayed yet again with Alita Battle Angel delayed to release in its place, and now Dark Phoenix is finally seeing the light of day. The reshoots kinda did a number on this film as well. It was originally about an hour longer than it actually is, and the entire third act was completely rewritten. It was originally meant to take place in space, but they decided to change the setting to a train for some reason. Maybe because this movie's a train wreck. The warning signs for this film don't even stop there. For those of you who don't know, this is the directorial debut of screenwriter Simon Kinberg, who has made a career off of crappy 20th Century Fox movies. Sure, he penned Mr. and Mrs. Smith, which I really love, but he is also one of the people responsible for the following: Jumper, which is a great soap good movie that I can't recommend enough. This Means War, which is not entertaining at all and you should definitely avoid. Fan Four Stick, which is... I don't need to comment on that one, you know what I have to say. And a few of the X-Men movies, those being Days of Future Past, which is good, Apocalypse, which is not good, and an extremely comical twist of fate, The Last Stand. X-Men The Last Stand is a fairly bad movie that is so hated that in Days of Future Past they go to extreme lengths to separate that movie from the canon X-Men story. For those of you who haven't seen it, it's a film following the Phoenix arc, which is basically about Jean Grey becoming uncontrollably powerful and destructive and the X-Men have to stop her. Dark Phoenix also follows this arc and is basically Fox trying to make it work this time, but they hired the writer from the movie they literally erased from the timeline to not only write the new movie but also direct the new movie. This was doomed to fail from the beginning. At the very least, you'd hope that the things the other X-Men movies do well would be done well here, but no, the film's a failure in nearly every single way. Nobody did a good job acting here. Sophie Turner's performance reminded me of Joey King in Wish Upon.
Give it back. Right now. After everything that's happened? Yes, June!
I've heard Sophie Turner is great in Game of Thrones, but she did not do a good job here, and it's very obvious she is not cut out for a lead role. Jennifer Lawrence played a bad impression of Gabby Hanna. Michael Fassbender gave the worst performance of his entire career. If I'd never seen Cody Smith-McPhee before, I presumed that he'd never acted, not just in film, but in anything ever before. His performance was genuinely that terrible. James McAvoy seemed confused as to why he was there. Evan Peters was nothing special, mainly because he got nothing to work with. One really awful thing about the acting was the chemistry between the actors. There are scenes with characters who are couples, but there's no chemistry there at all, and it's hard to watch. But then you have other scenes that feel inappropriately erotic. There's a scene very early on with Mystique and Jean Grey that seemed like it was taken from a fanfiction. There's also a scene where Charles Xavier is talking to young Jean Grey and the tone made it feel as if they were about to make out, but Jean Grey is 8 and Charles is a grown man. It was not helped by the many scenes where people asked Charles, "What did you do to her?" I get what they were going for, but it just felt inappropriate and kind of laughable. Speaking of dialogue, this movie features some of the worst I've seen all year. Every line is either exposition, characters explaining the events we're seeing, or characters repeating information we already knew. It's all very cookie cutter and flat out cheesy at times, but the tone is driving its attempted seriousness into our heads to the point where I couldn't help but laugh at a lot of the film. This film does things seriously that have only been done as jokes in other films. There's a scene where Quicksilver sustains some pretty serious injuries, but the way it's presented is flat out cartoonish. There's a scene that's literally ripped straight from Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, except they really want you to be scared for some reason. Even ignoring the unintentional gags, this film is just so unintentionally funny. The action is so ridiculous it could easily be put into an X-Men parody. There's a lot of scenes where Jean just flies off into the sky so that the scene can end, and the effects are embarrassing. For a $200 million movie, it looks super cheap and unpolished. There is not a single effect in the film that looks remotely competent. This may be the worst CGI I've seen all year, and I've seen Hellboy. The cinematography is bland, the color palette is dull, the presentation is overall lazy. There were definitely attempts at good shots, but they were just attempts. The pacing is awful, the editing is lifeless, the designs are uninteresting, all of the deaths were really funny. The script was fairly atrocious overall, the characters are not likable, the structure is bad, and nothing makes any goddamn sense. I'm not going to go over the whole film because it's kind of predictable, but I do want to talk about some aspects, so I'm going to enter spoiler talk here. If you don't want spoilers for this movie, click on the timecode on the screen now. 3, 2, 1, go. So after a while, Jean Grey has gone into hiding after she really comically kills Mystique. She's manipulating everyone's mind so people think she isn't Jean Grey, but evil Jessica Chastain shows up like, "Hey, I know who you are. The X-Men are all just big bullies. Come with me to my friends. It'll be dank." And Jean actually goes with her to this hotel place and they hang out. And it's epic for her, I guess. Meanwhile, Magneto is receiving word that she's been spotted and goes off to find her. But what you need to keep in mind is that Jean's had everyone's minds manipulated. Nobody but Jessica Chastain and her alien buddies can see through her disguise. So how did anyone see this? I also want to know how they relayed this information to you considering you're on a remote island. This doesn't make any damn sense. The aliens themselves are also really inconsistent. Some of them die by simply being shot while others are practically immortal. There's no continuity. There's also a scene where Charles Xavier, a wheelchair-bound man, can be seen driving a car, which was pretty funny. And at the end of the movie, Jean Grey just starts turning enemies to dust. Honestly, I feel like the reshoots only happened to bank off Infinity War and have her Thanos people. There were admittedly other stupid or funny aspects to this movie, but I'd honestly recommend this to the point of not going into everything and not giving everything away. This is basically just a YA movie with a higher budget right down to the opening and closing monologue. In fact, while watching I realized it was kind of a ripoff of The Darkest Minds in nearly every way. Hilarious! Anyways, overall this movie was terrible and I had a great time making fun of it. It's not the worst X-Men movie and it's not the worst superhero movie of the year, but that does not make it any less awful. The only competent thing about it was the musical score by Hans Zimmer. I'd highly recommend you check this movie out as it's really stupid in the best way possible. I'm not going to try and act like everyone is going to enjoy this movie. There were people walking out during it, and at the end of the film I could hear people discussing how much they hated it. But if you can laugh at awful garbage, this is right up your alley. What a hilarious movie. I'm giving X-Men Dark Phoenix a 1 out of 10. That's the end of this video. Like, share, subscribe. I'm bad at outros, and I'll see you in whatever I do next.